Elsewhere, Florida 29, Tennessee 16. This was one of the night games. It was one of the big dogs on our preview episode that we did on Wednesday. And Florida jumped out to a lead, never really relinquished it. 26-7. They played solid defense, ended up winning 29-16. I think it's fair to wonder at this point what the future looks like for both of these teams the rest of the way. We can go into detail as for what happened here, but I found myself as I was jotting down notes drifting to the what ifs. What if what we saw from Florida, especially on the ground in this game? What if what we saw out of Graham Mertz in this game, which was not pinball statistics, but was very solid and kind of composed and within the framework of the system? Like, what if these things project forward and it wasn't just a flash in the pan against Tennessee? And on the Tennessee side, what if their lack of pop that I think we unfortunately saw out wide this evening is something that is more of a feature than a bug?
Wow. I think it's more of a bug in this team than it was a feature, and we had come into the season thinking it was going to be a feature. Yeah, there was something about Joe Milton. Even though he made plays, he never really seemed in rhythm. You had the turnovers, you had the sort of what I guess this isn't fair to say, but I thought it was sort of uncharacteristic, though he hasn't started a full successful season for anybody, be it Michigan or Tennessee. And so he's still finding his way. I'm sure the coaching staff is still finding their way in a Hendon Hooker list, a Jalen Hyatt list universe for the Vols. But to me, the story was we came into the season expecting more from this Tennessee defense.
No.
And that first half, look, Graham Mertz wasn't incredible, but he was fine.
Yeah.
And if Florida fans are told that Graham Mertz will be fine the rest of the year,
you'll take that 100
you'll
times
be
out of
thrilled.
100.
The story is Trevor Etienne. The story is the offensive line just busting open lanes for the rushing attack. The big runs. It was a Montrell Johnson had a couple touchdowns, I believe, as well. And so it was creativity for an offense that needs it because the receiving firepower doesn't seem like it's always going to be there. And certainly Graham Mertz is somebody who is going to lead this team down the field consistently. That's not going to be there this year. So you see a lot of the motion. You see the lanes being opened up in the rushing game. And look, this is also just what the universe demands of college football. Tennessee losing in Gainesville. That's just what we've gotten used to as college football fans. So I don't think this means anything dramatic for Tennessee moving forward. You know what your homework is. And for Florida, it's encouraging, especially with the recruiting class coming in, that this team played with a ton of fight, both figuratively and literally at the end of the game with the kneel down stuff and the fight and boxing. And so there was a lot of emotions were running high there, Ty.
Oh yeah.
Players getting chippy. It was a very strangely officiated game at the end there. So a cool story for Florida because I know it would have been easy to write off the Gators after their Salt Lake City visit. But at the very least, it seems like they're going to play with some fire the rest of the year, which you're going to have 2 to 3 Graham Mertz games where you're like, what are we even doing? But maybe you pull one of them out because of the rest of the offense and the ability for that defense to step up.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he looked fine. All things considered, I thought he looked fine, despite the fact that there are a few rough patches in the early going here.
Yeah.
He was very composed in this game. And
Played
their ability to move the ball on the ground against Tennessee was really encouraging. It was really encouraging because Tennessee, you may recall, we talked about it all offseason. Tennessee was a really good rush defense last year. And one of the questions we had was, well, what's the secondary going to look like? Can they get that piece of it solved? Well, Florida ran on them. And if Florida can run on other teams in the SEC, then I don't know. I think it's interesting. It's a different narrative than maybe what we thought after that Utah game where they kind of got pushed around and they didn't look good outside of like the first 2 series. So this is encouraging if you're a Florida fan. I don't know if you caught the discussion that they had on the broadcast, by the way, and then we'll move on. We'll talk about Alabama next.
I didn't. This was in the 4 wide, and I didn't have audio on.
They were talking, I'm not going to say ad nauseum, but they spent a few minutes of the broadcast talking about how, Graham Mertz got number 15. You know who else was number 15 here at Florida?
Yeah.
The collective eye roll.
Yeah.
Across the ballerhood, I'm sure was plentiful. Anyway,
number 15. By the way, and good for Florida. Florida ran last year. Good for we expected them to be able to run this year and for them to step up in a big game because Florida is always going to be measured against Georgia, against Tennessee, against Florida State. And so that's a checked box in this.
We knew they wanted to run. We didn't know if they could.
Right.
And they did.
Yeah.
They did.
Absolutely.
29-16 your final. Florida gets a really big home win. Good for them.